COVID, obviously, we're doing these virtual town halls. We think it's better for everybody's safety. So I think what we'll do this evening, just to start things, is I'll ask the chairman to speak. He'll introduce all the members of the legislature that are with us. You'll hear from them very briefly. I'll give everyone just a very brief update about where we are in terms of Albany and a couple of things that I think are probably the most pressing issues. And then we'll turn to you and we'll take your questions. Really, from my perspective, and I know the chairman feels the same way, and the members of the legislature, really your questions or your concerns are most important to us. And we want to be in a position to be able to help you or address the concerns you have. And then hear really from us about our position on issues or how we think we might be able to help you with whatever issue you may be dealing with. So I see some recognizable faces that have joined us this evening. Thank you all. I see some new faces, but nonetheless, I am definitely pleased to be here with you all this evening and look forward to the conversation that we'll have. Chairman?
Thank you, Senator, and thank you again for hosting us. As you said, we've been doing these virtual town meetings now across the county, and you, of course, across the district. And I think, in absence of being able to be in front of people, I think this is a good alternative. We've heard from a lot of constituents across the community, and we're certainly glad to be able to do that and listen to what your concerns are and see if there's things that we can do to help. And we're very appreciative of all of you here tonight. We have several legislators that are in the districts that are here tonight. We have Legislator Matt Hilderbrant, Legislator Greg Baldwin. We have Majority Leader and Legislators Cindy O'Brien and Legislator Matt Pasquale as well. And I'll turn it over to the Majority Leader first and allow her to introduce herself. But I'd just really like to say thank you. And the Senator hit the nail on the head. What we're looking for is just the opportunity to be able to hear what's important to you and see what we can do to help resolve those issues and just see what's on your mind and see if there's something that we can do. So to that, Legislator O'Brien.
I want to welcome everyone tonight. I'm Cindy O'Brien, Majority Leader. I cover the District 10, which is Shenango and Hillcrest. And I look forward to any questions or any issues that you might have tonight, and look forward to some of your questions.
Legislator Baldwin.
Hi, thank you all for being here. Greg Baldwin, I represent District 6, West Endicott, out to West Corners and parts of Maine. So thanks for being here.
Legislator Hilderbrant.
Good evening, everybody. Matt Grant, District 9. My parts cover Lisle, Triangle, Nanticoke, Barker, and parts of Maine. And I see some people I see out there. Hello.
And our last legislator tonight, and my good friend as well, Legislator Matt Pasquale.
Thank you, Chairman Reynolds, and thank you, Senator Akshar, for hosting this town hall tonight. I want to welcome everyone. Matt Pasquale, I represent District 7. That covers the eastern portion of the village of Endicott and the parts of towns of Maine and Union.
All right. Thank you. And back to you, Senator.
Great. So again, we want to get to everybody's questions. So if you have a question, please just hit the participant button, and then in the lower right-hand corner, just hit raise hand, and then Emmanuel will unmute you and we'll take your questions. So I just kind of want to address a couple of things that are pressing in Albany. As is typical, we would not go back to Albany until after the first of the year, but I think because we are in unprecedented times, I imagine that we'll be back in Albany probably, I'm guessing, before the election. The governor still has his executive powers. The legislature has not repealed those. So the governor is making a lot of the decisions in terms of the direction of the state by himself. I happen to disagree with that. I think, in fact, the legislature should be in Albany doing their job and being part and parcel to the conversations that are taking place in terms of the decisions that are being made in terms of dealing with COVID and dealing, of course, with the budget deficit. The budget deficit started out as a $6 billion hole prior to this year's budget, which is $177 billion. It's with a B, not an M. And that has grown to date to around 15 billion in terms of where we stand right now in terms of the deficit. Much of that, of course, is driven by the lack of revenues because of the COVID-19 pandemic. So I think we'll be back in Albany to deal with what is probably the biggest overarching issue, and that is, how do we close this budget deficit? I happen to disagree with my colleagues on the other side of the aisle, not to make things political, but we just have different thoughts. My friends from New York City are seriously considering raising taxes again. And I've listened to enough of my constituents here in the 52nd Senate District to know that people are tired of paying taxes. I've often said that we don't have a revenue problem in this state. We have a spending problem. We spend a little bit too much money, I would respectfully offer. And so my friends across the aisle are considering 10 new taxes, much of which are on the highest earners, but some of which are, of course, on the middle class. There will be a new tax on clothing, on jewelry, on vehicles, a new tax on digital advertising. So if you had a small business, you had a farm, whatever it may be, and you were advertising things that you were selling, there'd be a new tax on all of that. The second biggest thing that we're dealing with, of course, is the school aid issue. Many of you have probably seen that the governor has withheld 20% of school aid money that is supposed to be going to our local districts. It equates statewide to $5 billion worth of withholdings. And here in my Senate district, just in Broome, Tioga, Boces, it amounts to $75 million worth of withholdings. Now, the governor has in fact been talking about making 20% reductions or withholdings really through the entire conversation in terms of the loss of revenue. So nobody should have been surprised, I suppose, that he did in fact withhold 20% from education. I just didn't think that he would have made education losing 20% revenues. Again, $5 billion statewide, $75 million in Broome, Tioga, Boces. So I asked the governor, I called on the governor last week to immediately suspend all economic development dollars a year. And these are projects like the LaGuardia Airport or the air tram or the walkway from the North Country to New York City, those type of projects. The Erie Canal, $300 million he's spending there to upgrade the Erie Canal. I've called on the governor to immediately suspend those economic development projects and instead bond for the $5 billion that we need to get through this year and hold schools harmless. I happen to think that our school districts, our children, our educators are far too important. And I think we need to prioritize, wants versus needs as we move forward and we try to figure out this revenue piece. And I would just respectfully argue that prior to increasing taxes on anyone, whether it be the middle class or it be the highest earners in the state of New York, we take a really deep dive and a really close look at how we are spending money across the state. And, in a $177 billion budget, there are plenty of places in which you could find monies that we waste. Much of the governor's argument has been, well, where is the federal government's help? The federal government should, in fact, give us. He is asking for $59 billion. Again, the deficit, as we're on this Zoom call tonight, is $15 billion. That's as described by the budget director. He is saying $59 billion will be what it will cost us over the period of 4 years because of the lack of revenues. I do, in fact, think personally, I don't want to speak for any of the other elected officials on the line, but there is a place for the federal government to help here. The CARES Act, the state of New York received $5.2 billion already from the federal government, $3 billion of which went directly to the state, and then about $2.2 billion went to local governments. And I think Dan and I think the chairman and I think the other legislators would agree with me. The best course of action, if we do get additional monies from the federal government, and this has been my advocacy in terms of dealing with our federal partners, that the money flows from the federal government right to the local government. Because all too often what happens when the federal government or anyone else funnels money through the state of New York, if you were expecting $1, by the time it gets down to the local government, it's usually 70 cents or 50 cents. And I think that that's highly problematic. Nobody knows the local budgets better than the local elected officials. And if the federal government is in fact going to help again, which sadly, I'm not sure that they're close to some type of compromise. I see that the Problem Solver Caucus, where Congressman Reed happens to be a member of, this is a bipartisan group. They put forth a proposal today that, in fact, and Chairman, I don't know if you've seen this yet, but had about $500 billion worth of aid to localities, which I think is incredibly important. So while we wait for the federal government to come to some type of compromise, as I said to the governor last week, I think it's incredibly important and incumbent upon us to make our own plans and figure out our own destiny rather than waiting on the federal government to do whatever it is they are going to do. So with that, Chairman, you want to offer some remarks? And again, please, we want to take your questions. So if you have questions, just hit that raise hand button and we'll call on you. I'll speak for all the elected officials. You can ask us anything you'd like. You're going to get an answer. And if we don't have one, we'll certainly get you one. So, Chairman?
Yep, Senator, I appreciate it, and you absolutely can speak for all of us. We do think that the federal government does have a role, and we would absolutely prefer that it does not go through the tax mill up in Albany, because there's always that handling charge, and whenever we wind up, there's any funds involved with it, whether or not they generate it or whether it's a pass through, there usually is some kind of surcharge that's associated with it. So, I agree with you. I think the place where we need the help is at the local level. And, you wish the federal government and the state government could interact and work like we do here locally, where we can get along with everybody, and the politics of things don't get in the way. We're all here trying to help. And I mean, the senator's been a great advocate for us, and in particular about trying to get the resources directly to the local level without them going through Albany directly on things. So Senator, we appreciate that, and certainly appreciate all that you're doing to advocate for the county. I mean, we're beginning our budget process right now, and as everybody understands, the problem is revenue, and sales tax in particular is one of the things that's impacting us. But when the governor shut down businesses, and he's been slow to open up some of them, and the casinos were an example of it, and we want to make sure everybody's safe. That's certainly first and foremost in all of our minds. But when you had private casinos that were opening up, and some of the ones that were dealing with the New York State licensing that weren't, and some of the process seems selective and arbitrary. You had bowling alleys, you had a variety of different businesses that were kind of left without a plan, even though business owners like the bowling alleys, the gyms, all those individuals had opportunities to create plans that they'd asked them for months in advance, and had been working diligently on it, only to have them delayed and delayed and delayed. And fortunately, now we're starting to see some of that open back up, and hopefully these businesses will wind up surviving. But the long-term implications are certainly staggering, and but some of the implications are probably exacerbated by the point the senator made earlier, which is the autonomy that the governor has. And in situations of emergency, you do want the discretion to be able to make the policy decisions that you need to respond quickly. But as that goes on, the need for immediate action, meaning in that same day, that same hour, within a day or two, becomes less of a concern, and long-term planning becomes more of a concern. And not having the legislature involved in that process, to me, is I think it's an affront to what government is supposed to be. The legislators are the ones that are closely connected to the residents in their community. They're the ones that are going back and talking to the people in those districts to learn what the priorities are. In many cases, in similar formats like this, and that, although the senator's done a good job advocating back to the governor and has been very clear about what his positions are and what he's hearing back in this district, there isn't a forum for that unless they're back in session and unless some of those decisions are made in concert with the legislature. So that's a concern. I do think that's something that the residents should be paying attention to as well, because the decisions that the governor are making right now, those that are impacting us both financially and policy wise, are going to have the longest term implications for us, and they have a significant impact on it. So as for us, for the county, like I said, we're beginning the budget process. We're concerned about revenue. Right now, the county executive proposed a budget with a tax cut, which we're glad to see. We've been able to pass budgets for the last 2 years with tax cuts, and we've always put a premium on trying to be able to provide the services that matter, but certainly at a rate that the taxpayers can afford. We're cost conscious, and we want to make sure that we recognize the realities of our community, which are, business owners are struggling, homeowners are struggling, individuals are struggling, families are struggling, and we want to be aware of that, and certainly are looking to do everything that we can to control costs and certainly keep the budget in line. So we're going to be beginning that process and starting those meetings within the next 2 weeks. And it's a very detailed process. We usually have about 20 plus budget meetings, and those will all be on Zoom. So if any of you are interested, you will have the links up on the county website. You certainly can contact our office, and we'd be glad to make sure that you have the information. They're instructive, and they're certainly it's a good opportunity to find out what's going on in county government. But with that, I don't want to talk too much on it. I'm really interested, and I know the senator and the rest of the legislators are as well. We want to hear what's on your minds and see what we can answer here. And to the senator's point, if we don't know the answer, we'll find out and we'll get back to you. So
just hit that raise hand button in the lower right hand corner, and we'll take your questions. Dan, while people are doing that, can you just talk maybe just a little bit about what the revenue forecast or the revenue projections look like here in Broome County, just so folks know?
Certainly. So we have about a $400 million budget that we deal with each year for the county. And just as an example on it, we're projecting that by year's end, the sales tax shortage could be any place from 15 million to 20 million, a shortfall on it. And depending on how things go right now, that number can shift. It's an estimate that we're working on. Currently, as of right now, it's down about 12.5% over last year. And then there are things that the governor has done that exacerbate the situation for the county. So usually what we have is a situation where the state winds up, we provide a service that we're required to under New York state law, and the state reimburses us for those services. It's a standard arrangement that they've had to provide services throughout New York State's history. This year, the state is withholding money from the county for services that we've already provided. So what it winds up doing is putting additional economic pressure on the county, and it's not long-term pressure. What it is actually cash flow. So if we were expecting $6 million to come in, which as an example, in one of the places where we're looking for funds, the county has to try and figure out how to pay bills that they were going to use the money that was supposed to come in for those services from New York State to pay the bills. So the local taxpayers wind up fronting more money for the state. And now what we're being told, through executive order, and it's been unclear at best how much the state is going to hold. But we've heard estimates as much as 20% of what they give the county on a regular basis. And that means another potentially 20 million. So when you couple that with the sales tax shortage, you're looking at a situation for a 1 year difference of almost $45 million, which in a county's budget is significant. So every $700,000 that we have is a 1%, the equivalent of a 1% tax increase. we've put some financial controls in place over the last several years and built up some reserve in different places that we're able to utilize. And we do have some borrowing capacity that we're able to utilize to try and manage our way through this situation. But the concern, obviously, is if the situation continues for an extended period of time, that flexibility is going to get decreased, and then we're going to have other problems to deal with as well. So I'm not sure, Senator, if anybody else had a question at this point.
Yeah, Emmanuel, Ms. Beal. Again, if you want to ask a question, please just hit that raised hand button in the lower right-hand corner. We're happy to take your questions, and we actually look forward to it. So, Ms. Beal?
Hi, good evening. Well, I have kind of a two-pronged question for you. You said that you would like, that there are places that you could cut the budget. So I am curious what things you would, and I'm going to say what services, what essential things that are in the budget that you think that we could do without.
Okay.
And well, you can answer that, and then I'll ask the other half of my question.
Sure, I'll give you 3 places we can start. How about the $420 million film tax credit that we give millionaire and billionaire Hollywood producers? Or the $100 million that is in the budget this year for the public financing of campaigns. Now, you and I may disagree on this, but the last place I think taxpayers should be spending their money is to allow the chairman or I or any of the elected officials on here. So you're going to pay an additional tax. So I can buy a lawn sign, I can do a radio commercial, I can do a TV commercial. I just don't think that that's right. Or how about the $27 million that we spend to give free college tuition to those that are here illegally, when we're not even going to fund the Excelsior program this year because we don't have the revenues? Could you imagine stopping Excelsior or suspending Excelsior, but not suspending free college tuition for those that are here illegally? That, unfortunately, I think is bad decision making. And again, really, I think in the most simplest of terms, for me, this is wants versus needs. What are the wants of the people of this state? What are the needs of the people of this state? What people need is to pay lower property taxes. What people need is to pay lower income taxes. New York is not affordable. That is the truth. Living in New York, I think, is incredibly difficult because of its unaffordability. So I'll give you another prime example here. And the county legislators and the chairman know the Medicaid issue better than anybody. The federal government offered the state of New York $6 billion, $6 billion in Medicaid funding. And there was one caveat attached to that $6 billion. And remember that the deficit when we started this conversation pre-COVID was $6 billion, much of which was driven by the Medicaid system. We have one of the most robust Medicaid programs in the nation. And I'm not suggesting, Janet, for 1 second that we shouldn't have that program. No, we should. Do I think that there's fraud and abuse in the system? I do. Do I think we could do a better job of managing that program? I do. But we didn't take the $6 billion from the federal government because the federal government said, we'll give you the $6 billion, but you can't adjust the formula in terms of what local government is paying. What local government is paying for their share of Medicaid. Now, many years ago under Governor Pataki, they capped that program where the local share would stay at this amount of money. Since the day I was elected, I've put a bill, I've carried a bill that where it would require the state to take over the local share of Medicaid. And outside of the 5 boroughs, Janet, it's about $3.5 billion. And if you included the 5 boroughs, it's north of $8 billion. So it's very, very expensive. But I tend to believe that it's a state-run program. The state, in fact, should pay for all of it. So that bill has not moved. It moved a couple of times when we were in the majority. It certainly hasn't moved since we've been in the minority. But you know, I think it's things like that, right? So yes, we have a revenue issue. Yes, I am complaining about us spending too much money. I'm not suggesting for a moment that we not fund programs that we need, but it really comes down to, okay, listen, we can't, you or I, if we were used to making $1,000 a week and now we're making $600 a week, well, we have to live within those, numbers. So what are we going to do? My guess is that you or I wouldn't go out to eat. We would find a way to stay home and live within our means. And I just think that at the end of the day, I don't know how the governor looks at moms and dads who have children in school. He looks at educators. He looks at school administrators who are trying to educate our children and say, I'm sorry, Broome, Tioga, BOCES, we're going to take $75 million away from you in terms of the monies that you needed to educate our children. But we're still going to fund the public financing of campaigns. Thank you, taxpayer. That's my thoughts on that issue.
100% agree with you, Senator. That one to me is, from a philosophical standpoint, I actually think that the idea that they would pass something like that to me is unethical, because you're benefiting in some way from the passage of this. It's not going to, because the system is multi-pronged, you're still going to have if you believe that there's corruption in that process, you're still going to have that, because you have people that can opt out anyway. So now you still have, what you have is a more complicated system than what you had previously on it. And, they wanted to restrict LLCs and corporations, but, you could get into the contributions from unions. I've seen different PACs and different contributions where you'll have one union have 14 different sub-unions provide resources to the one candidate, and they do it as a means to circumvent the election law. And I mean, things like that need to get cleaned up too. I'm all for election reform. I think the senator, I'm speaking for him as well, but I'm sure he agrees with that too. We want things to be fair. We want them to be straightforward. And the idea that they passed that public finance reform without trying to really address some of the underlying problems at it. I spent 4.5 years as the deputy election commissioner in Broome County. I'm intimately familiar with all the problems that come as a result of some of the election laws. And Janet, if you ever wanted to talk about it, I'd be more than happy to go through that with you too. Not that that's what you were asking specifically, but to your point about where could you find resources, the senator mentioned the economic development programs too. How many times have we heard where money has been spent from the state to try and bring companies in, and there was some large incentive package because they were going to bring in X amount of jobs, and they brought in a fraction of what they said they were going to bring in, and they didn't do what they said they were going to do. And there's no clawback on a lot of those deals. There's the scrutiny that they need to place on it. And I think some of the ones that the senator brought up about pressing pause right now on some of those projects that are more to me are more pet project values for those communities, but given the whole context of what's going on financially, they may not make sense. And there isn't a lot of review in that where are you going to cut funds from? I worked in the state assembly for 2 different assembly members, and trust me when I tell you, we were one of the few offices that turned back in money every year from both the staffing and from postage and other things, and I know the senator does too. It's one of those things that there's places where you could save money. You just have to have the will and the dedication to do it, and that's part of the reason why having everything right now being a decision of from the executive and not really including the legislature. He hasn't convened a group or an established entity to ask the legislature, hey, where could I save money? Could we work on this together? Could we get the senators and the assembly members together and identify all the different revenue sources? There's a chance that if they did something along those lines, that they could actually find real reform. When we're looking for it at the county level, I speak with the county executive on a regular basis. He's a Democrat, I'm a Republican, and it works out fine. We're very open back and forth. And when we had to do the furlough programs, the legislature, the members of the majority met with the county executive. We've discussed things back and forth, and you just don't see that at the state level.
I'm certainly not knowledgeable like you two are on the details, but what hit me is the couple of things that you gave us as examples are, other than the Medicaid, are drop in the bucket compared to what the deficit will be. So there, we have to think in bigger terms if you're going to look at it in that way.
Well, I would just, if I may, I don't mean to interrupt you. You know, we're talking about let me go back to education, right? In terms of the $5 billion hole there. You know, I think I was pretty frank and forward in terms of, okay, yes, the hole is very big. And if in fact, who knows if the comptroller today said that revenues to date are down about $3.2 billion. In the month of August, though, it was projected, we were projected to be about a half a billion short in this month, and revenues are up 390 million, right? So at least we're tracking in the right direction. But if there is in fact a big hole like that, right, to the chairman's point, I'm saying stop spending on economic development right now. You have the Empire State Development Corporation. Really, many of the projects are shrouded in secrecy. They never create the jobs that they promise, and we spend $8 billion a year there, right? Is a new JFK or a new LaGuardia nice? Is it important? Suppose it is, if in fact you have that money, but we don't right now. So you're saying, yes, you have to think big, and you're right. The three examples I gave you get you to like 600 million, close to $1 billion. But it's not enough to close the entire deficit. But maybe suspending a big program like economic development for the foreseeable future until we can get our feet back underneath us, it would be the responsible thing to do, so we can provide for the taxpayer, and we can provide for the people who live in this state.
And Janet, if I may, the idea on this, you know, when you're dealing with a budget, it's not a question of trying to close the entire gap with one shot, right? Most of the time, what we're looking for at the county is cash to be able to manage the expenses there. So while it may not seem like a lot, you know, if it's several hundred million, at the time, that can make the difference between having to borrow money, not being able to pay people that work there, not being able to provide whether it's health benefits or something along the essential programs. That does make the difference on it a lot of times. And it's the you know, so when they're providing or doing the executive orders right now through executive authority, the other thing that's missing on this, and the legislative colleagues on this will know that I'm a broken record on this part, it's accountability and transparency. So one of the things that we have to go back through is we go through and look at all the purchases in the county when they come before there's two different ways they can go through it. One is through the Board of Acquisition and Contract, which the members of the legislature sit on. And the other is through legislative resolution. So every expenditure that's coming through there, you know, we go through, the legislature goes through in detail. So Legislator O'Brien will tell you, she asked numerous questions when, you know, on the finance committee or through county administration. Legislator Pasquale does the same with public works. And so does, you know, we have Legislator Hilderbrant, Legislator Baldwin. All of them are asking similar questions or specific questions about expenses and whether or not things are necessary. In the state right now, in response to the COVID crisis, what they do a lot of times, what the governor's doing a lot of times is, we need this now. They're not checking on price. They're not checking on whether or not the firms are reputable. They're not checking on whether or not they received the equipment that they've got. We've heard numerous reports where the state purchased things through executive order that we didn't receive because the company either didn't exist or they were so desperate to get it, nobody did any fact checking. If they just did that, if they just involved the legislature and they were, again, I'm not saying that if it's something that needs to be resolved within 24 hours, that's not something that you need an executive authority for. I'm just saying that there are things and purchases in there that could take a little bit of time that they could ask questions on that they're not right now. And I'd be willing to bet you that if we went through the receipts and expenditures and just did in a business, you'd have a profit and loss statement. If we went through that you and I could go through it together with a highlighter, and I guarantee you that we'd find stuff in there that when you add it up together from expenditures that the state made that weren't necessary or that were overpriced, you would find the financial flexibility to not only help the state pay bills in the short run, but also the county. What happens a lot of times is when the state is short on money, they go, well, we're going to hold this money back from the county. So it's actually you, me, and all the local taxpayers that are paying for this. And, you know, the senator mentioned, you know, some of the not taking the federal incentive for it. And I mean, there's such a difference in mindset. The governor sat and chided the federal government for the idea that they would have to contribute some portion of money on that enhanced unemployment benefit. And they said, well, how are we supposed to do that? We're in the middle of a COVID crisis. Meanwhile, the governor is holding back millions of dollars from each of the county, making them do the exact same thing and have to try and pay for it. And we're like, well, where's the money going to come from? I don't know how the federal government could be so cruel and hold this money back from us at the state level. I'm like, well, you're doing the same thing to the county and the local levels, Governor. I mean, it's you can find the financial flexibility if you look. I'm not sure that the governor right now is committed to looking. He to the senator's point, he asked for $60 billion to close it, which at the time was 10 times the amount he needed. I mean, it's not realistic.
That makes perfect sense. Jenny, the second part.
Well, the second part is the opposite side of that, about raising taxes and helping the economy, because articles I've read say that by cutting taxes, you actually hurt the economy, and raising taxes on the wealthy who can afford a tax increase actually brings more money into the community, into the economy, and that builds on itself and helps to build the economy. So when you talk about cutting taxes instead and not raising taxes, are we not cutting our nose to spite our face? Especially, I'm not saying that the economic development programs are perfect, but their intent should bring more money into the community, which should build on itself.
Well,
so where do you feel, how do you feel about that?
Senator, can I just jump in?
Yeah,
first?
please. And then, yeah, I have some thoughts, but go ahead.
So,
Yep.
You know, the idea that you would cut taxes to spur does make sense. And here's the reason why, and this is the metric, one of the metrics that I would take a look at. So I work in financial services, so we deal with dealing with money throughout every day. I deal with these types of issues. What you've got right now is a mass exodus of the wealthy from New York State, because they're looking to live in an area where you're dealing with lower income taxes or no income taxes. Like Florida doesn't have an income tax. Texas, same situation. So what happens is these affluent individuals realize that they can have a company or operate their company any place, and they change their residence to other states. If we tax at a higher rate the wealthy individuals specifically, just targeting them in general, you're going to chase the individuals that have the investment capital in the state out of the state. That to me would be biting off our nose to spite our face. The economic development programs, there have been numerous accounts where, you know, you look at some of the solar projects, and the one that was the economic czar was a Kelly-Eros that worked for the governor, that, you know, they were under investigation for fraud. And there are numerous accounts of things like that are going on. That system needs to be, if they were going to do economic development properly, from my perspective, you need a third-party neutral group that is not controlled by the governor or by political interests, that they're actually vetting things from a reliability standpoint, and they had real metrics that they came back to meet. Because, again, like the point that I made earlier, they invest so much money in these programs, and they don't come back and ask them whether they met it. And if they do, they go, we tried. And then they go on to the next one. To me, it's ridiculous. We get held accountable every year and every 2 years on an election cycle, which we should. And, you know, these groups go out and waste all this money in these economic development programs, and they don't get held accountable, except for when they get investigated and charged with fraud. So, sorry, Senator.
No, that's great. Janet, just a couple thoughts. I think you know me well enough. I spent a lot of time in the community. traveling this district, and I have yet to find somebody who's come up to me proactively and said, please raise my taxes. I think we should pay more. To the contrary, people are saying, why am I paying so much in property taxes? We are in the midst of the lowest personal income tax numbers that we've seen really in a decade. So we're in the midst of those personal income tax dollars going down. But even the governor's own budget director, Robert Mujica, and the governor is not sold on and I very rarely agree with the governor, but I am in total lockstep with him here. He's yet to buy into this tax the wealthy as well, because the governor's budget director said that we already have one of the highest tax rates on the wealthiest in the nation. And the 2% in the state of New York pay over 50% of pay into over 50% of the tax revenues that are generated. Think about that. 2% of the people already pay more than 50% of the revenues that are generated. And we already have the highest tax bracket for the most wealthy. I look no further than California, Janet. In 2012, there was a Prop 30 on the ballot to raise the tax rates for the most wealthiest. The following year, they lost 45% of the anticipated revenues that they thought that they would generate. In the following year, they lost 60% of the anticipated revenues. So, I'm just not sold on raising taxes. For me, we're in the midst of a crisis, right? We could all agree on that, regardless of our political persuasion, Republican, Democrat, conservative, independent, liberal, whatever it may be. We're in the midst of a crisis. I just don't think the first thing that we should be saying is, okay, we're losing tax revenue. Let's tax the hell out of everybody. Let's just raise everybody up a couple of points. They'll pay more into the system, and we'll figure it out there. For me personally, and again, you and I may disagree on this, but for me, it's like, okay, well, let's hit the brakes. Let's look within the four corners of this $177 billion budget, and let's see how much revenues are coming in. What do we in fact have to spend on, and what can we wait to spend on? And at the end of the day, the chairman is right. There are less and less people in the state of New York to tax because people are leaving. The last decade, we've lost 1.2 million people. I just read a report a couple of days ago. We lose 249 people per day, 249 people per day from the state of New York. So that's my take. If you'd be so kind, Janet, I just want to get to a couple more questions. Sure. I think I've done my best to answer them. Amy Beardsley, you're next, and then we're going to go to last name Hartzell. But Amy, you're first.
Hello.
Hi.
I was wondering if there's an end in sight to the governor's tyrannical, when are you going to take executive power away from him? He's gone too long with no oversight.
Yeah, so let me, if I can, I want to just address what I would refer to as the elephant in the room in terms of this issue. You may hear from some that I didn't take that vote. I was not in Albany that evening to take the vote that gave him those powers. Had I been there, I would have sided with a few of my other colleagues and voted no on that particular bill. But I want to tell you why I wasn't there. Many of you know my wife and I just had a baby. But I was, when she was pregnant, I was coming home every evening because I thought it important to make the 2-hour and 15-minute drive to be supportive of her and our stepdaughter and come home and be as helpful as I could. So the day was over, our day, a legislative day was over in Albany. Everyone left, but as is typical sometimes in Albany, the majority said at 9:30 in the evening, let's come back and we're going to give the governor all this power. That's number one. Number two, and I think most important, is this, that both the minorities in both the Assembly and the Senate have on 3 occasions now put forth what is called in technical terms a hostile amendment. We've put amendments on bills that were on the floor to remove the governor's emergency powers. And that has been voted down by the majorities in both the Senate and the Assembly. And for me, I'm just going to be frank with you, if you don't mind. I think they haven't taken his emergency powers away because they don't want to have to make hard decisions. They don't want to have to do their job, quite frankly. And as the chairman said, I think the people who know their communities or their constituents the best are members of the legislature, right? I mean, I live here in Enwell. I'm in the district more than I am in Albany. And with all due respect to the governor, I don't think he understands what's happening here in the 52nd Senate District or a Senate District to our west or to our east, because he's stuck in Albany. And I think that the members of the legislature should, in fact, be part and parcel to the conversation, because that is what you all elected us to do. So the very short and frank answer is we have tried on 3 occasions to take those emergency powers away from the governor because, right, we're not in the beginning stages of the pandemic. As the chairman said, and I agree with him, this has gone on now for many months. And we're at an infection rate below 1%. You don't have to make those immediate decisions. Governor has changed over 200 laws by executive order during this time. Think about that. I'm sorry?
I said I'm aware.
Right.
And
I mean,
I do not fault you or the Republicans at all for this, but it seems like there should be some other checks and balance to keep this from happening.
yeah, and it's really, it is, I guess it seems oversimple, but it's just as simple as the legislature coming back and removing his emergency powers. Number one, I don't think that they want to butt heads with him. And I say they, I mean the majorities in both houses. Number two, I don't think they want to make hard decisions. The governor is, try to be polite here. The governor is a political genius. He really is. In terms of the cuts that we have seen, and they really are cuts, he has called them withholdings. He's calling them withholdings because the statutory language is such that if he cut a particular department or a particular issue, the legislature, by way of the statutory authority, has the ability to come back within 10 days and make changes to those cuts. Because he is using the word withholding, right? 20% withholding. In theory, the schools would in fact get that 20% that they were withheld. The legislature has no option to come back because he didn't technically cut the department or the program or whatever issue it may be. So I'm pontificating, I'm sorry, but we've tried on 3 occasions and we've been shot down by the New York City Democrats. That's the most simplest way for me to say it.
If it were up to the county legislature and we could do it, we'd have that meeting today. And I know the senator would do the exact same thing. And you know, the government was designed to have that branch to be a watchdog for the people. Like I said, they're the ones that are the closest to the voters by design. And they're supposed to come from that body. And the idea that in an emergency, yes, it's called emergency powers on it for a reason. It's supposed to be a very specific tight window on it. The idea that we would still be in that exact same spot is he's found a loophole essentially on it. And I agree with the senator. I think that there's a lack of will by the majority in the Assembly and the Senate to act on it. They should, but I don't think they will.
Any other thoughts, Amy?
I don't know. I mean, the Attorney General, the Supreme Court, there has to be some check and balance. He can't just have power forever, indefinitely. There's no end date. There's no end date.
No, I get it. And, you know, that
and people are already leaving New York in droves. He's going to drive out the entire tax base.
One of the things I think the greatest concern in terms of that particular statute and the language associated with that is that he determines when the pandemic is over, right?
Yeah.
And, you know, talk about bad language and somebody not paying attention to language in a statute. Why would we give anybody, any one person? And listen, I'm not saying that managing something like this is easy. Anybody has a playbook to manage something like this, right? I mean, we're just in uncharted, everybody would agree with that. But the fact that this has gone on and on and on, and I think we're abdicating our responsibilities, quite frankly.
And Senator, this is Cindy O'Brien, Broome County Legislator. I think he's hurting the small businesses around the area by holding them hostage as to when they can open up and when they can't. All the rules and regulations that he's imposing on these businesses, the added expenses that they incur, that then again, they pass on down to all of the residents of Broome County. You know, something has to give here, and I don't know what it is, but we have to find a way to get him to stop making all these crazy, ludicrous decisions.
It's probably one of my greatest frustrations in dealing with the pandemic and the closure or the shutdown, however you want to describe it, was, you know, I think we just saw like arbitrary rules or arbitrary directives from the second floor. And then, you know, we would tell a certain industry, we would say, okay, well, this is what you have to do by Friday. And then, you know, Thursday evening, they would say, well, no, we're going to change that. And everybody was just kind of left wondering, like, well, how do we move forward? And, you know, I don't know how you make the argument anymore that we have to remain shut or we have to have, you know, incredible restrictions on what we're doing. I mean, the infection rate is very low. I think everyone, all New Yorkers have done a remarkable job doing their part, you know, to stop the spread and to keep the numbers low. But at some point, if we're talking about generating revenue, we're certainly not going to do it by keeping places shuttered. Look at New York City. I mean, we love to go there. We really do. Get a show, get dinner, come home the same evening or stay the night. I mean, the face of New York City, Manhattan in particular, is going to change forever. You have so many small businesses that will never open their doors again because of really the restrictive policies. And I would describe the relationship between the mayor, Bill de Blasio, and the governor, Andrew Cuomo, as a very poor relationship. It seems like they're always butting heads. So I don't think anything will get accomplished there for the betterment of New Yorkers.
One of the things that you can point to as an example of the problem on this is when we originally were dealing with businesses and trying to get them to a place where they could open up, when they were told by different entities that they needed to put a plan in place. So the obvious question is, where does that plan go? We couldn't get an answer. There's still, if you ask that question right now, it's like, where are you supposed to submit this plan for review or approval? I had numerous businesses that were asking me in particular that were, you know, hey, Dan, where can we send this? Who's going to sign off on it? Is it the local level? And I mean, as recently with the bowling alleys, before that got changed, I mean, I had people from the bowling alleys, and the directive from the state was like, well, they're not really going to enforce it. You should just tell them that that they should open up. This is from a state official in one of those departments. They said, well, we don't think the local law enforcement is going to effectively enforce that anyway, so you should just test it. And I'm like, I can't tell a business owner that, you know? I mean, are you kidding me? But it was that type of reasoning behind it. And I'm like, I'm a person, and I know my colleagues are here as well. We're all rule followers on things, and me in particular, you know, I just want to understand what the process is so I can tell people what they need to know so they can move forward. And that was a typical example through this entire process. The thing that's been complicated, you'd think if one person was making all the decisions, it should be clear where everything is going. The only thing he's done is make it more opaque. You can't tell, and because of that, there's no accountability. So you know, when a business owner comes back to us, I mean, the senator, you've heard it, you know, same thing. Where I can't open up. Who am I supposed to talk to? Is it the Department of Health? Is it you know? Is it a different department? Is it the county? Is it the state? You know, and then I mean, they were having you know. Was it a ruckus over the fact that they were doing birthday parades at one point, and then that got through. And it's like, you know, I mean, I've got a 7-year-old at home. I know that the senator does too, in addition to the baby. I mean, you tell the 7-year-old, I'm sorry, you're not allowed to have a birthday parade at one point. I mean, I can't even imagine the logic on some of this stuff. So
Amy,
I digress. I'm sorry.
It's okay. Amy, did that answer your question?
As well as you could.
Yeah, I promise you that if we do in fact go back, which I think we will, as I said during the outset, I promise you that our conference will in fact try to move the issue again. My guess, I'm not a mind reader, but can't predict the future. Well, I think on this issue I can. My guess is that my friends from New York City won't strip his power. But with that, Emmanuel, let's go to Ms. Hartzell.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. Now, I'm going to have to bail to go to another meeting after this question, so just want to let you know your answer to this question is, has nothing to do with the fact that that I have to leave in a couple of minutes, whether I like your answer or I don't like your answer. So I'd like you to expand a little bit and explain further. You had mentioned at the beginning of the hour about college funding for undocumented students. And I'm not really clear on what it is that they are getting now that you think they shouldn't be getting. It's my understanding, I mean, I have a website up now, and maybe it's out of date, but it says that undocumented students cannot apply for federal or state aid in New York State, but may apply for private scholarships. So what was the, can you give the details? You said something about college funding for students who are here illegally?
Yeah, it's called the DREAM Act, and it was something. It was, and that's okay. And it was something that had long been discussed in the state legislature, and it was an issue that had not moved for a period of time. When we lost the majority, I say we, the Republicans, the issue came to the floor. It was voted on, and it was signed by the governor, and it gives $27 million for college tuition for those that are not here legally. And I have been opposed to the DREAM Act ever since I was elected. For me personally, it's about having conversations with people across my Senate district who have told me I can't afford to send my children to school. The only way I can send my children to school is to take out a very high interest loan. And why should I have to do that when we are giving free college tuition to those that are not here legally?
So if I may ask, like you say, your typical student whose academic profile qualifies them for college admission. Maybe they've gone to high school here in the United States. What would be the amount that the average student would get from the state? Do you have details on that? I mean,
I don't have the number. Emmanuel, is Amanda on the line with us?
Like what would say your average B+, A-, A student who goes to, say, Oneonta or maybe goes to Cornell, how much would that student get? I don't really have a sense of how much $27 million. I mean, generally, I was an educator before I retired. I have a great interest in an educated populace. If the students have already gone through public schools, I imagine that no one in the room objects to students going to public schools, which is also not a cheap thing to educate a student all the way from K through 12 in public schools. I'm just wondering what's the dollar amount?
And somebody from my staff see what the average DREAM Act award is. And if we can't get the answer, you know what? I just got the answer. It's up to $5,000 per year.
Up to $5,000 per year.
Yep.
Okay. And is that?
Excuse me one second. Emmanuel, that's for the tuition assistance program, not for the DREAM Act. Is that correct?
Yes, but the DREAM Act does allow those applicants to participate in the tuition assistance program.
Okay, so it's just a little bit north of $5,000 per year.
And is that more than what your average middle income person or a student who would be funding their own education, is that more than what someone who is a resident of New York State would get?
Sure, because I mean, if you're applying for Excelsior, you have to meet certain criteria, right? Certain income criteria. And what if? And I've heard this story countless times, where I think the number is up to $100,000 combined income now. If you make over that, then you're not eligible for the Excelsior program.
Okay.
Where a mother or father would say, I have a son and a daughter who wanted to go to college, but we make combined $102,000. So we don't have access to the Excelsior program. So I have to go out and find the money. I have to take out a loan or not send my children to college. And that is a conversation that I've had with parents throughout my Senate district. So for me, it really comes down to if we're spending on average through the DREAM Act of $5,100 per year per student. I personally, and again, we may disagree on this, I personally think that we should give that $5,100 to somebody who is here legally and not illegally.
Just to give you an example, I came from a house of, I was the youngest of 6 children, and my dad happened to make just north of $100,000, but with 6 kids, it didn't matter. They went on the total amount of money that was made in the household. I didn't qualify for anything for my grad or for undergrad or for grad school. And by the time I went to grad school, there was nothing available because I was working full time. And it's one of those things where it's a question of fairness and equity. And some of the tuition program that they have now, where they do provide assistance for state schools, or did. We had a situation where, if you just happen to be on the back end of it, or had one more semester to go on it, there were stipulations that you didn't qualify for. You couldn't get that tuition covered. And I had one niece that lived in the exact same house that could get it, and one niece that couldn't, because of just the bureaucratic red tape that they have through this that isn't fair. And I think part of the point of this is, is that the right place to spend money at this time? I think educations are important. I went and got my master's degree in public administration because I thought it was important that I was educated in this field, because I wanted to serve in it. And so I understand that. And I think it's important that they do. My wife has her master's as well. But I would like to see it, accessible for everybody.
So go ahead, I'm sorry.
Okay. That was kind of a lot. I mean, everybody's got their, it's their story in terms of how they paid for their college education or how they paid for their kids' college education. But I would just urge you to consider, I certainly, understand where you're coming from with this, but in the interest of an educated populace, if there is someone who has the wherewithal to contribute to society, and they're capable of doing the work, I think, in my view, and I'm going to have to go to another meeting, a little bit of a break is not uncalled for.
What I'm going to do for you, ma'am, is if you're amenable to this, is I'm going to send you both programs. I'll have the staff.
That would be great. That would be great.
You can compare the original tuition assistance program, the new Excelsior scholarship program, and then the DREAM Act. So you have the 3 of those.
Okay. Yeah, I'm interested in that. We sent our 2 kids to school, and it's been a little bit of a while, but I understand the problems involved in it. And
sure. If you'd like to speak about it a little bit more after you've looked at the stuff, I'm happy to do that.
Yeah. All right. Okay. Thanks a lot. And I am going to sign off.
Thank you so much. Thanks for being with us. Does anybody else have a question? If you do, please just hit that raise hand button in the lower right-hand corner, and we'd all be happy to answer them. We obviously want to hear from you. If nobody else does, I'm happy to take them. Ms. Taylor, Emmanuel, if you could unmute Mary Ann Taylor for us, please.
Hi, everyone, and thank you for having this tonight.
You got it.
I just, the governor's handling of the coronavirus was abysmal, although there's a lot of people across the country who are saying he's wonderful. I see him as consistently blaming everyone but himself, saying governors don't do pandemics. His decisions are to blame for what happened in the nursing homes here. And I'm wondering what's being done to hold him accountable. I haven't heard anything recently. And then my second part of that question is, what's the status of his proposed partnership with the Gates Foundation to reimagine education?
I'll take the latter one first, if I may. I think that one really fell on its face when he talked about reimagining education. You know, I came out very strongly against that, and I'll get you to the points that I made on this issue. If the staff could just send this to Ms. Taylor. The last person that should be helping us with education in the state of New York is Bill Gates. We got Common Core from Bill Gates, and that has been an utter disaster. So I was very, very opposed to that particular measure, and I think it just got stuck in the mud, if you will, and it's not moving forward. On the first piece, in terms of accountability, I happen to agree with you. The governor is very quick to blame the president for everything and never accept responsibility for anything. And the fact of the matter is that there are a plurality of people in this state. We've tested the issue. Other people have tested the issue. We're calling on an independent body to do an independent investigation in terms of the deaths in nursing homes. The number of 6,000 or a little north of 6,000, I don't think that's an accurate number. I think that number is much, much higher. And the fact of the matter remains is that I know for a fact that there were county executives across this state that had asked the governor and his staff to create step-down units for those coming out of the hospital, those who lived in nursing homes. And they told these folks, no, that's never going to happen. They can go back to the nursing home. So you can blame the CDC, you can blame the president, but the fact of the matter is that the Department of Health, Commissioner Zucker, and the governor were very forward in terms of what they want done. And in my humble opinion, there is some responsibility that lies in the Capitol for those decisions and those deaths. And the only way we're going to get to that, in my humble opinion, is to have an independent body do an investigation to figure out what exactly happened. I don't think, I chuckle, I smile a little bit, I don't think the Department of Health should be issuing a report on nursing home deaths, right? It was their directive that required people to go back, and that's why people died. So we're advancing legislation that would create that independent arm to do that. My hope is that the New York City Democrats will move this issue, because really it's not a Republican or a Democrat issue. It's not a Brooklyn or a Binghamton issue. It's a state of New York issue, right? It affected everyone. So I'm hopeful that that will happen. My colleagues, anybody have any thoughts on either of those issues?
Yeah, Cindy, you can go ahead. It looked like you were going to say something.
I was just going to say that I think he's held all New Yorkers hostage until he gets help from the federal government to get his bailout or whatever. And he's imposed all these different rules and regulations, which if you look across the board, none of them, there's no consistency anywhere. And it doesn't make any sense.
No, I mean, for me, the concern is he seemed more concerned with giving executives at like some of the nursing homes a pass on how they were related to COVID and whether or not individuals could sue them in connection with COVID-related deaths, shielding those individuals rather than trying to actually set policies there that would help them. So he was quick to shut down businesses across the state, but it took him longer to enact a situation where visitation was stopped at nursing homes. So my uncle's at one of the local ones here and wound up getting COVID. Thankfully, he came through it fine, but they had situations where they had to take individuals from hospitals and they weren't even prepared at the nursing homes to be able to take them. So, and there weren't standards on, all right, so what kind of unit? Is it a zero pressure unit there that, that will help keep the infection rate? Can you contain it? That's there. A lot of places you're dealing with aging infrastructure in these nursing homes in ways of like air handlers and ventilation systems, things like that, that are not really set up to deal with infection. And so what they're doing is, well, we're not going to deal with it at the hospital. We're going to make you take it back. And a lot of that has to deal with the reimbursement for Medicaid and how the hospitals financially work. And instead of trying to figure out ways that work for everybody that actually keep people safe, in some cases where it was a financial decision, it's like, yeah, we'll just ship them back here. And then, like I said, they didn't create a standard right off the bat. If they were really worried about our most vulnerable populations, they would have stopped the visitation right off the bat, made that across the board until they had got a handle on that. They would have stopped the transferring of individuals into nursing homes without guaranteeing that they were contracted with the virus. We had situations from a staffing perspective where we had rotating nurses that were working at multiple facilities. And in one of the cases for Broome County, that was one of the ones that was infected. And, they went to multiple nursing homes because they're a floater and they cover extra shifts. So they're at 3 different nursing homes, and it's like, but that's okay, right? So, the governor didn't do a real good job of setting policy early on the places where, to me, I think is obvious. And he spent all this time pontificating on TV about how they were going to shut down businesses and keep everybody away because of the rate of infection and what they're worried about. And then what happens is it got to the nursing homes and it snowballed. And then now they're dealing with the infection rate going through the roof at these nursing homes, the mortality rate going through the roof from that. And you see them spinning whatever story they can to try and say that, oh, well, we think it's the individual nursing home director's fault. And I'm just saying, from the county's perspective, dealing with that situation at the county, I mean, the colleagues here can attest to that. We get resolutions all the time trying to get staffing allotments there to try and keep up with the requirements that we have. And then we spent, hundreds of thousands of dollars trying to make renovations to just try and figure out what's going to work. And the vast majority of the renovations were based on recommendations from our individual nursing home director. That's not an infectious disease specialist, but he's trying to do something to do it because there's no direction from the governor or the state on what they're supposed to do. There's no protocol. There's no best practice. Instead it's shut it down. We'll let you guys worry about the businesses and the impact of that. It's like, well, what about the nursing home? Yeah, we'll get to you. Don't worry. And we're still waiting, in all honesty, for a lot of the direction and a lot of the things that we're supposed to. And God forbid there's another spike in the fall and we're in the exact same spot, because they're slow to act on those types of situations. But where they think that they can get a headline, he's right out in front.
Very, very good point. Marianne, I hope that answered your question. Okay. Ms. Swan, we're going to go to Dorothy Swan Emanuel if we can, please.
Hi, Dorothy.
My concern is healthcare, the cost of healthcare. There's several people in the state paying little or nothing for premiums, and my premium as a single and several other people are $600 a month, and then our coverage is worse than the people that are getting the health care at a cheaper rate. Isn't there a way to make it, I know it's income based, isn't there a way to make it the same percentage for everybody?
Yeah, I'm sorry, who was your healthcare provider?
Excelis, Blue Shield, Blue Cross Blue Shield.
Yeah, I think that this is an issue that really, honestly, I don't know if any elected official has gotten this right yet, right? Because you raised the issue where it's not working, it's not fair. How do we fix it? And for me, I don't have a good answer for you on this particular issue. I'd be happy to have a sidebar conversation with you about your particular issue and to see if we can find a way to move forward. So I guess that's my thoughts on that issue. I'm sorry, I don't have a better answer for you. Chairman?
I think the thing that you get with the counties or with governmental entities is that what they're primarily focused on is trying to reduce the cost at the individual entity. And it's an enterprise, as you know, unto itself. So, the county is self-insured. So we wind up, we have different policies and contracts with different vendors, but we're trying to manage things like the prescription costs, the different healthcare costs, and which programs that we're in, which benefits that we offer. And it depends. Part of the answer depends on where you acquired it. If you acquired the insurance on through an employer, if you acquired it through New York State's market, or if you acquired it through your spouse. So each of them are different plans, and the problem a lot of times is the cost controls that are baked into each of those plans are different depending on the carriers. And because there are so many different carriers, it's difficult to do it. They could probably tier it or create platforms of standards and levels of care on it. But, the challenge becomes the pharmacy and the pharmaceutical side of the medical care is, we don't think of it as necessarily as being ingrained in the cost of healthcare, but it's a major cost driver on it until they get the cost of that aspect controlled. And this really has to come at the federal level, not at the local or the state level. It's got to be driven. I think it does at the federal level first. And then you would wind up seeing some ancillary benefits from the state level down for the types of plans that are offered. But because the vast majority of the cost controls that they put in place are driven at the federal level, just not they're not at the state level. So, but I have my health insurance licensing too. So, I mean, it's one of those things where if you wanted to talk about it as well, Senator, I'd be happy to join in as well if you want. And there are different things that you could potentially do on an individual basis if you're talking about the cost on for employers or for an entity like a municipality, or at the state level, or at the federal level. It just depends on where you're looking for some kind of relief. And if it's you individually on it, there's things that they can do. And if it's your employer, you can talk to your human resource officer there to try and help get the costs reduced with different plan options, because they should have somebody that's there that's able to go through it. If it's at a municipal level, or they should have experts. We have one in ours, which is the risk and insurance manager that serves that function as well. But yeah, I would be happy to talk more at some point if you were inclined as well.
Matt, you have some thoughts?
Yeah. Hi, Dorothy. I have spoke a little bit with you on this concern of yours, and like the others, maybe when you're not working, we can go into a little more detail and maybe find some some help or some conversation to help lead down this path, because it's a very large one and very confusing. So I'd like to be a resource as well to give you a hand in depth. Probably not at work though. Okay.
Okay.
All right.
So what we can do is, does anybody else have any other questions? I'm happy to take them. We're happy to take them if you do. Mr. Kunkel.
Hi, good evening, everybody. Don Kunkel. I just wanted to caution Senator Akshar about the DREAMS Act. I mean, it makes a really good soundbite saying that the DREAM Act is, for illegal immigrants, but it is, but it's not. I mean, you have to have attended a New York State high school for 2 or more years, graduated from New York State. These aren't people that are just coming into the country and trying to grab a free education. They're trying to better themselves. So I caution you on any program that supports people trying to do better, enrich themselves. I'm really for the DREAMS Act because it does help people to become contributors to the society.
Yeah.
I just wanted to make that statement.
Sure. I appreciate your statement. I would go and I would say a couple of things. I think any student pursuing college or trying to get a college degree is trying to better themselves. Number one. I would also just make a statement to you. Go to the Excelsior program scholarship page right now, and you'll note that it's closed because of the declining revenues and because of the COVID-19 pandemic.
And that's wrong.
It is wrong. It's wrong that that particular program is closed, but yet we're still funding a program at $27 million. And for me, I think it's a little bit more than a soundbite for me. If you want to describe it that way, I mean, you certainly can, but it's more than a soundbite for me because of the time that I've spent with moms and dads who can't afford to pay for college for their kids. And it's really about,
you know, I've got a daughter in graduate school right now myself, and was the beneficiary of the Excelsior program. So I'm well aware of that program. And, you know, we should keep those programs in place because these people are going to be the future taxpayers, you know.
But Mr. Kunkel, the point of that too is that they're not required to be in the state. They're not required to stay here. They're not, I mean, that's part of the issue. And I don't disagree. I don't think the senator or I or any of the other individuals here are suggesting that it's not important that people have access to college. We all want everybody to be able to get to it. You know, I want that for your kids. I would want it for my daughter when she's of age, and we all want them to do well. I don't think that's an issue at all. I think that during times where there are financial concerns, I think that you have to look at things. And the question that he was asked was just in terms of, you know, what are your financial priorities? You know, I think reviewing all expenditures, whether it's this program or any other ones, I think it's legitimate to take a look at them and determine what can you afford right now versus what can't you afford. I think that's a discussion that regardless of this program or any of the other programs, we look at all the time. I mean, the governor had, in a lot of ways, had cut away mental health services. I mean, you want to talk about issues that we have and priorities. I mean, you could talk to any of the law enforcement individuals that are dealing with mental health issues because they cut programs and they're forced to deal with things that they were not necessarily trained to deal with a lot of times. And, you know, it's just about what you're setting your priorities for when you're trying to figure out where should the money go at this point. And I think the question that he was asked at the time was, you know, can you give me examples of what you could cut? You know, and it's a fair discussion, at least, or a fair point from my perspective to decide, hey, look, if this is a place where money is being spent, it's always okay, in my opinion, to review things of that nature and go, is this the highest priority right now? You know, I mean,
I hear you. And I think education should be the highest priority, be it K through 12 or, you know, college. I don't think that's an area where we should be cutting.
I understand that, but if, you know, I've spoken to numerous families, and when you could go door to door and talk to them, and I mean, I had a lady, and I've told the story on the floor before, where you know, she sat there and she told me that I asked what I could do for her, and she said, well, it's too expensive to live here, and you know, the stairs were falling apart. She had a hole in the roof on the side of it, and I said, well, I understand, ma'am. I said, I you know, I want to be I'm fiscally responsible. I want to make sure that we're doing everything that we can. And I took a step back. She grabbed my arm and she says, no, you don't understand. I'm deciding whether or not I can pay to keep this place or eat. And so, I mean, while I think that the priorities for education are important, you know, there's the Maslow's hierarchy on it. And to me, you know, food, clothing, shelter are the primary things that we need to survive. And it's one of those things for me that experience just really stuck with me. I'm not saying that education isn't important. I told you earlier, I have my master's degree. I believe it's important, and we're trying to set a good example for our daughter as well. You know, it is. It's just, I think it's always appropriate, and I appreciate your perspective, but I think it's always appropriate to take everything into account.
Sure.
I appreciate that, Mr. Kunkel, your position as well. Any other questions? Seeing or hearing none, Chairman, if you could just give some closing remarks.
Yeah, and I'd just like to thank the senator and everybody that was here tonight for their questions and participating. I think, you know, events like this, because we get an opportunity to hear directly from the constituents about the things that that matter to them. And look, we may not always agree on every issue, but I know from my perspective, with me, it's important to have those dialogues to try and find out.
We lost Dan's audio.
Yes. Dan, we can't hear you.
I don't think he can hear us either.
Well, thank you, everybody.
And I'm very grateful for all of you for participating as well.
Chairman, thank you very much. There was a slight audio issue, but
sorry.
I think that's okay. I think we got the gist of what you were saying. Thank you. Legislator Baldwin.
Yeah, I want to thank everybody. Great questions, and we're here to help. And you know, if there's anything I can do here in West Endicott or out in Maine or West Corners or anywhere actually to help you, please feel free to contact me. My name, number, everything is on the website. So thanks again for spending time with us.
Legislator Pasquale.
Thank you, Senator, for hosting this town hall meeting. Did another great job as always. And I want to thank everybody that called in and had their questions. It was a good discussion.
I just want to publicly thank both Legislator Pasquale and Legislator Baldwin for their leadership on the battery recycling project that is happening in the village of Endicott. These two guys have been, they're just doing yeoman's work to ensure the safety of the community. So I want to thank both Greg and Matt for their leadership on what is probably one of the most important issues going on in Endicott right now. So thank you very much for that. I know the chairman feels exactly the same way. And Chairman, you too. You stepped up to the plate. You don't represent Endicott, but you stepped up to the plate in a big way and giving the support to your members to make sure that the state of New York, quite frankly, is doing everything that they're supposed to be doing. So just want to thank you both for your leadership there. Legislator O'Brien, Majority Leader.
I would just like to thank everyone for joining us. And I also would like to say hi to our veteran, Eric Fetterman. Yeah, thank you for your service. And thank you for attending. And if there's anything I can do in my district to help anyone that has any issues, please reach out. Or if anyone would like to attend the budget hearing, please do, because you learn a lot about Broome County.
Thank you, Majority Leader. Legislator Hilderbrant.
Yeah, I'd like to thank everybody for coming in this evening and for the senator to put this on. I think this was great to get some things out there. I saw at least 4 people that literally are right around the corner for me. So if they're still on there, just get out and communicate with us, and you know, we can relay back some information or anything. I think this is how you know, we get things done, especially in this time, and it's good to see people on here and participating. So thank you, and thank you again, Senator.
It's my pleasure. To the team, can you please put up the phone numbers, please, and the email addresses, just so everybody can see them? I think we can make that yep, great. Thanks so much. So here is both our phone numbers and our email addresses. This is the most accurate way to get a hold of us. Let me say hello to Kata, though. I see she's joined us, Dan's beautiful daughter. Welcome to the virtual town hall.
Hi, Kata.
I too just want to thank everybody for joining us this evening, and you know, we'll continue to do these virtually because this is the way that we have to conduct business. But if you want to talk to us directly, just call either of those numbers or use either of those email addresses, and we'll get back to you. Chairman, I just want to thank you for joining us this evening, and to the county legislators. I just want to make one last point, and then I'll end. It's an election year. I just want the people on the line to know that I unequivocally support your four members that are on the line this evening: Legislator Pasquale, Baldwin, O'Brien, and Hilderbrant. You have my unwavering support because you are the party of common sense. You are putting the taxpayer first. You're putting law-abiding New Yorkers first. And I will do everything in my power to ensure that we continue to take care of the people of Broome County. And we're doing so as a team effort. So just want to thank you for your hard work. I know you're going into a budget season in a very, very difficult year, but the people of Broome County should rest assured and rest easy that you'll do what is in their best interest. So I just want to thank you for that. And again, thank you everybody for joining us this evening. And I look forward to seeing you all out in the district. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night, everyone.
Good night, everyone.